Beyond a shadow of a doubt, I can prove that the Bible is very specifically structured, man-made, and that there's a template in the background and a numbering system that we don't see. I can demonstrate that. However, proof comes how? If I can only prove it to myself, it's not proven, is it? So I'll just keep doing my research. I think that we've lost something. My name is Dan Paulson. I'm an independent researcher working in the book of Genesis. I see its origins from the Enuma Elish, from the Babylonians, and a numbering pattern that is being shared between them in the background that today we don't know. Nobody knows the Bible well enough. We've got, this is actually where there's a lineage going on right after the destruction of the Tower of Babel. And down here at the end of this, we have something, and Terah lived 70 years and had sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran, or Haran is the son. Down here, what we're going to see is the days of Terah were 205, and Terah died in Haran. He died inside of his son. Okay, do you know that? Bible readers, how does a dad die inside of their son? No, I'm going to tell you, you don't know the Bible or what's going on in there. There's an encoded process, and these have to make sense. If you can't comprehend that they're even there, you can't analyze them. They have to, and then if you do see them there, they have to be analyzed then. We're not going there with the material. Okay, the people who worship the material are not analyzing the material. This is the metaphorical ark being carried by many, looked in by few. I don't think it's been looked in for a long time. That's what I'm doing. There's something in here, in the numbering pattern, that people see, and I know what that is. I know exactly what it is. Now, the first thing I want to do is show how they are encoding in here. I'm going to teach you how to read their code. The code is in the story, and the code is in numbers and in repeating nouns and verbs that are repeated the same amount as those numbers. Where do those numbers come from? It is the numbers that we see in the background, isn't it? When we're looking at the Bible and we see things continually show up, there are 22 numbers that show up over 6,000 times. Yeah, where do they come from? All right, without getting into too much depth, in its simplest form, it starts right here. These are observable. On the seventh day, God ended his work, and he rested on the seventh day, and he blessed the seventh day. Right there, seventh was said 3 times. We've got a 7 and a 3, both right there occurring then. This is something you just have to stick with. You might go, what? Okay, if you keep doing this, we're going to keep doing this, and you'll realize that's how they're encoding the story. In fact, 3 and 7 account for over 800 repeats in the Bible. Right? Yeah, Job has 7 sons and 3 daughters. There's a reason for those numbers. You have to keep moving along with this. This is encoding a starting point on a template. Naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden. There's 2 creation stories. Line them up parallel. 7, 3, naked, unashamed in the Garden of Eden all represent the same place on that template. Now, we want to grow this pool of numbers. How do we do that? Well, the first thing you do right down here where we've got the story of Cain and Abel, it has just happened, and Cain is being sent on his way, and this line right here, it doesn't. What kind of sense does this make? If Cain shall be avenged 7-fold, truly Lamech 70 and 7-fold. What does that even mean? 7 and 7 from the 3-7 pool up above just grabbed a 70. I forgot to mention, this was a huge breakthrough by reading through the King James Version. When they're saying things like 930 or 812 or any things like that, those are not compound numbers. Separate them. Treat them as 2 different numbers, as an 800 and a 12, as a 900 and a 7. Magic occurs. And I'm going to show you something else. Next, we're going to run into what's called an analog pool. It's a lineage, actually. But if you go through it, there's some things in here I want to point out to you, including down here, and all the days of Lamech were 7, 70, and 7. Do you see that at the end and at the beginning? So I want to be clear on this. That 7, 70, and 7 in front, and the 7, 70, and 7 in the end, and in between it's as if these 2 blocks right here announce that what is in between these 2 lines is an analog form. Collect this. Here's the start of it. Here's the end of it. But here's something that we have to understand too, that if we were back when this story was originated, we would have it memorized. We would know all of these things simultaneously. Right now, we are, as big as this might feel, we are approaching this linearly, step by step. We cannot talk about this in terms of, wow, I got the whole story in my head. We can't. They did. So we have to do this, and it's slow and cumbersome, and you have to slowly build it in your head to see it. All right, in that group of numbers, a couple of things happened. 7 was repeated 4 times in that first line, and then this one, and then 70 was repeated twice. 70 is definitely gathered up, but between those two occurrences is this entire pile of numbers. Now let's look at a couple of things. These look weird. Look at this. 930, 807, 912. Okay, let's not do that. We're going to grab the 30. We're going to grab the 5. We're going to grab the 7. We're going to grab the 12. We're going to grab the 15. And here's why. It doesn't sound right. The 7s were the ones that were gathering things up, weren't they? Well, let's take a look at something over here. How many times is 900 said in Genesis? 7 times. There's the code. Do you see that? That would be like a 7 and a 30, or a 7 and a 7, or a 7 and a 12. Is that right? How many times is 8? 7 times. There's the code. It's a numbering code. It's a numbering repeat code. What about 7? 2 times. That's going to be different. We've got different things from different number piles that are going to begin to accumulate. As we go through, what we're going to find is that these numbers are pointing back and forth at each other. They sound cryptic, but look at that. That's a weird thing. And Jared lived, after he begat Enoch, 800 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 960 and 2 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 60 and 5. Where do these appear? 2 places in Genesis these appear, and they're both analog forms. That's how you read the code, and then gather numbers. And then what happens? Do you see that? We got a 12 right there. That's a good one. We got 12 tribes of Israel, don't we? 12 disciples. That cross-reference, what I want to do is jump to the book of Matthew. This is maintained throughout all of Abrahamic material, as I say, and I know where this one is. It's a quick and easy one to look at that very clearly illustrates what I'm talking about. So if we go to the book of Matthew right here, I know that I'm going to search for certain words. 3 is a number that they're going to be using in here. So I'm going to come over here and search for how many times the number 3 is used in the story of Matthew. 12 times. How about 7? 12 times. How about 12? 12 times. Okay, that's the kind of cross-referencing I'm talking about. It's going to just emerge everywhere. It's astounding. We don't know it. It's right in our face. We don't know this material. How many times is wine said in Genesis? 12 times. Wine is a good thing then. This is how now they are assigning weight to analogous terms, and it gets even thicker, okay? People that think they know the Bible really don't. If you read this at face value, you're the carrier of it. You don't know what's inside. And this is just a hint, just a barely a glimpse. Barely a glimpse. Nakedness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Nakedness is a good thing because it was gathered up in that analog pool. It is also repeated 3 times right here in this story about Noah after the flood, and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father. So we've got drank of the wine and was naked. The people that don't interpret this think that he was drunk on wine and that he was stripped naked, drunk, passed out in his tent. You got those southern ministers that, when people do interpret this stuff, that are saying that down here, and Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. That's because Ham saw him naked and wanted him covered. All right. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father. This is spiritual. We have gone through a healing process. We feel good. The wine represents a new feeling. The vineyard represents our new life experience, our new feeling as a result, and we are now uncovered. We saw the nakedness. We are now naked of it. The covering happens because we're going to have other issues. This is not a physical thing. This is a story built on a template. And if you continue to string it all together, actually, Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed in the garden. After first sin, they got covered. Here we have a purging happening and then an uncovering. There's something bigger going on than face value. People that read these as historical are really not utilizing cognitive processes. The people that are interpreting them to perversion are utilizing cognitive processes. But to what end? What's your motivation? What's your drive? What are you looking for? Seek and knock for righteousness' sake, not personal. What makes me feel good? What's the master teaching? What are we supposed to do? You see, I struggle to keep things separated there. Well, you know what? It's a life course. I think you can't separate it. Right now, what I need to focus on is those numbers. Okay, here's the collection then. What I have here, and I just call it the 3-7 grid. And if you look, you can see why. Is if a 3 is there and the 3 is repeated 12 times and a 7 is repeated 12 times and a 12 is repeated 12 times and other things, it's like they're not only repeating the numbers, but they're repeating a certain amount of times as each other. So they're like pointing back and forth. It's a cross-reference almost. So that's why I call it a grid, just for lack of, I don't know what else to call it. You look at it and go, what is that thing? Yeah, boy. People don't see it, and it's right there. But here are the numbers that have been collected. What they really represent is the Eden, or the naked, unashamed, in the Garden of Eden time in our life. All of these represent that point right there on the template, a starting point. The stories are going to be utilizing these as how many sons, daughters, days, months, years, age of person, all of that are going to be part of there. A lot of 40-year-olds, things like, okay, here's some numbers I have collected that I just put down that are repeated throughout Genesis a certain amount of times that put them on this list. So it cross-references that way. We looked at that one. The wine was 12 times. Nakedness, 5. Naked itself is 4. That only appears in the early creation. Uncovered, covenant, righteousness, righteous. We can see that there are things in here that are good things. Then first sin would be, if from Eden to first sin was a step. So from 7 to 8 is a step. From 3 to 4 is not. And I'll tell you why. Early on there weren't a lot of numbers in use, and they were using a lot of numbers as good things in the beginning. Later on they had to start doing a step process, but it didn't stay consistent throughout. And you know what? A better explanation might be that 1 through 7, that's 7-day creation. From 7 to 8 was the first sin step. So everything that's going to be derogatory has to be beyond 8, somewhere downstream. It can't be 1 through 7, I guess. Yeah. That's creation up to naked, unashamed in the garden. Step 8 is the first time something goes bad. So 3 to 4 can't, maybe that's the better explanation for it. But it didn't stay consistent throughout. For example, 40 to 41 isn't bad, even though 20 to 21 is. And that's just, it's going to keep taking more analysis. That's where I am with it. We know this because 40 is a good thing. It's collected as a number, but we also know that Noah's name is repeated exactly 41 times. And we find that 41 repeated elsewhere in the Bible. But we also find, if we go to the Babylonian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, that Marduk's name was repeated 41 times. Marduk, in that, has the same role as Noah does in Genesis. So those are fun things. That's the hero right there. 41, that's the called hero. All right. These are the numbers. 1 was collected. That's the one that's most repeated in the Bible. The 2, there's our 3, 485 times. I said 809. It's over 900. Anyway, these are the entire pool of numbers that have been collected and how many times they've been repeated in the Bible. And that brings us up to a grand total of those 22 numbers repeated over 6,052 times in the Bible. We have things like first sin, 8, 13, 21. We can see that. All right, are you lost? This is code. It takes a long time to get into it. You have to work it out in your own head in order to see it. It cannot be really understood by just listening to somebody describe it. You have to look at it. You have to understand it. I think knowing that it's there, I can point it out and show that it's there, but that's it. The individual, there's people that say there is nothing in the Bible that is like patterned, mythological, or anything like that. I would say that, myth and religion, they're both following the same template. What is in common is a template. Myth is one thing, religion's another. But if you look at them side by side, you'll see that they're both different genres of the same. It's a story that has a different impact. One of them is supposed to be entertaining, and one of them is supposed to be life guiding. Regardless, we have one template for the seeker. That is what we're seeking. Not the myth, not the religion. We're seeking the template. All right, so the template is there. The myth, whatever the sequence is there. The people that say, I've talked to people who say that's completely been discounted, that it's not there. Whatever you're saying is not right, and you're wrong. The first thing I know when that person says that has been debunked or discounted or something like that, that means they themselves can't see it. They're relying on somebody else's word. If they say it's been debunked, that means they're relying on somebody else. They're not looking for themselves. Don't even listen to them. They don't know. They're listening to somebody else tell you whether it's true or not. Who's saying it's true or not? When you go find the people who say it's not true, you find people that have a vested interest in it not being true. No, I believe this material, and there's no myth in there. There's nothing, there's no sequence, there's no pattern. There's no crossing of the threshold. There's nothing like that that's in there. When in all reality, the Bible has a handful of monomyths, including other material, though, that are not monomyths. Song of Solomon, Psalms, Proverbs, things like that are different styles of teachings. Daniel, Ezekiel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all of those are monomyths. Exodus, Genesis from chapter 12 on, sequencing, human life cycle. But let's look at this pattern. We're here to look at the number pattern. This is that, and that everything I just talked about is what is hidden in the number pattern. It's going to cycle along into a big, long teaching when all the time it's repeating a life cycle pattern in the background that sounds so radically different. But if you stop and think about what they were doing back then, that they lived through this. Think of all the time that you spend doing things. Imagine that you had none of those things, but you had all of that time, and you had the stories and nothing else. These would be very deeply understood. If you recognize that, then you should say, yeah, we really don't know much. There's a lot that could be in here that we don't see. And that's the case. But you see, it takes the computer to even find it. I don't know this stuff. All right, all of that together, the next step then is I'm going to grab that number pool and I'm going to go start grabbing other books of the Bible. And right in the beginning, we're going to look for dates, things happening, sequences, quantities of something, ages of something, whatever that is going to come from this number pool. Well, you may not understand what's there, but let's look and see that the numbers, that's the repeating that we're seeing. When we see stuff in the background, this is it right here. Let's take a closer look and see what magic unfolds. Okay, let's see it in practice. I'm going to go to Luke from the King James Version. This will be a fun one. I'm just going to point out a couple of things. Now for people following my work, the micro, the macro numbering, I want to show you something here. There we go. This is in chapter 2, right after Jesus' baptismal. And when 8 days were accomplished for the circumcision of the child, his name was called Jesus, which was also named of the angel before he was conceived in the womb. But look at here, 8 and 21. It's verse 21, and the 8 appears there. So there we have the continual correlation of the micro numbering alignment right in the visible structure. It's in our face. Okay, let's take a look at something. We got a 12. That's how old he was, 12 years old when he went up to Jerusalem for the custom of the feast. And it was 3 days when they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors. Do you see the 12 and the 3? Get down into verse 3. Now the 15 of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. 15 sounds very recognizable. These are the repeating numbers we have going on in the background. Jesus himself was about 30 years age. Yep, when he started his ministry. And then after a lineage, sure enough, then we've got 40 days in the wilderness, like the Jews were 40 years in the desert. 40's the clue. Doesn't matter what language you translate it to, 40's going to make it. Makes it easy. Clever code. All right, if you stick with me, I can show you some deeper things. Here's Job, the book of Job. This is the NRSV. I need to download another copy, but these numbers are good right here. This text is all good right here. What we have is firstborn to him were 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys. Right in this area right here, 7 was repeated twice, 3 was repeated twice, and 5 was repeated twice. We don't catch those. Those are actually coded pieces for us. And it tells us it's also that it's in the beginning. Look at what is happening up here. And if we actually backed up, we could look a little deeper. If we had it memorized, we would know that the land of Uz is said 1 time. Job's name is repeated 63 times. This may not be accurate because that's the NRSV. Blameless, 10. Upright, 10. This is a pure state person. We have inner pure qualities. That's what's being nested in the background of these stories here. Here's one in Genesis 14. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. Do you see the 12 to 13 step there? And perhaps a little tougher to see in there is it also went from served, 12, rebelled, 13th, and that would relate to Garden of Eden from being obedient on day 7 and sinning on step 8. First sin, moving on to step 8, the rebelled. Let's do a really extreme one. I've got Ezekiel from the King James here. Take a look at what we have. 30, 30th, 4th, 5th, 5th, 5th. 5th is said 3 times right here in the upper section. Do you see that? And we've got 4 all over the place. What happens if I come over here and look for 4? 55 times. That's a good number. However, I see some 4ths. 2 times, which is a good number. Which means 4 would be 53, which is a good number. What about that 5th up there? Exactly 6 times. Do you see the continual cross-referencing of the numbers of them in themselves? What do we have for... We're going to have 7 in here probably, huh? These are different because we have... Let me make sure I've got... 70 is twice, which is good. 7th. 4 times. Boy, that would make 7, 18 times. Okay, you know what? That probably takes more time to analyze. You can see some similarities, though. Okay, take a look at the 7th. 4 times. 7T, 2 times. Are those random? No, how about 10? Tender, 10th. Yeah, let's try something that won't require so much research. 20. Exactly 35 times. $30. Exactly 3 times. 40. Exactly 6 times. 50. 14 times. I don't know what 14 represents, but I see it show up here and there. 60. There's none there. All right, see down here where it says, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings, and their feet were straight, and the sole of their feet was... what I see in here is repeating things like numbers, 4, faces, wings. I'm going to come over here and take a look at some things. 4. We did that. 55. So that makes 4 53, which is a combination of 50 and 3. Yeah, good stuff. So let's go wings. Wow, 21 would be a bad thing, isn't it? Sodom is repeated 21 times in Genesis. I've not analyzed this, but you can see the numbering. Okay. 4, what are they? Faces. 15, so that's an okay one. What else do we have? 4, there are 4 faces, there are wings. Straightforward, likeness, Likeness. I don't know. Likeness 15 times. Wheels. $22, which is a good one. A creature. 15. Well, living creature. 15. Living creature would be what is becoming manifest. Throne. 5. Do you see what? What does this affect you in any way? Glory. 24. Rebellious. I don't know if I would differentiate between rebellious, rebels, and rebelled. Probably need to. Yeah, let's just skip that because it'll take too much for the video. I see transgress. That sounds like a bad thing. 13. Yeah, sure enough. All right, I shouldn't get caught up in word counts, actually. You can see that is there, but that's not what I'm looking for in the video here. What we're looking for is these repeating counts again that are really visible, that you don't have to search for like that. Okay, Joshua, King James Version here. Let's take a look at some of the same stuff. I'm going to start off with checking for the number 3. It appears here 12 times in the book of Joshua. How about 7? 7 is one you've got to watch. It'll come up with 70. Not here. 7th. 4 times, which is good. And sometimes, I don't think it'd be 7 score. I've never seen that one. So, what they have is 7 appearing 15 times and 7th, TH, appearing 4 times. That keeps them both good. Let's see, we've got tent. 11 is not good here. Oh, there's also a 10th. 10th is 1. That makes tent 10. Where was Noah after the flood? He was in his tent when he was drunk. That represents inside your purified self. Tent here, after removing the one that's a 10th, 10 times. Pure self. 20. Twice. 30. 3 times. 40. 5 times. 50. Just to once. 60. None. I did a 70, didn't we? 70, none. 80, none. 8, 1 time. 40 and 8, cities with their suburbs. So that would be bad. 40 and 8 is not good. 40 is a good number, but if you add it to an 8, it's not okay. That's just the same as saying 8. Let's see, 4 cities with their suburbs. You see suburbs repeated a number of times in here. I'm just going to look that up then. That's the code. Holy guacamole, 58 times. What that means when you interpret this material at the level of template, suburb is a place that you don't want to live. Suburb represents living in a bad place. And that's a psychological state of being, not a physical state of being, a psychological state of being. Life. 3 times. See, I get back into showing both of the numbers and the nouns and verbs are all in this numbering pattern. Strong, 10 times. Courage. 7 times. Courage, courageous, 7 times. Courage 5 times, courageous 2 times. Both good numbers, totaling up 7. It's all good. Do you see the magic that's there? This is why we see the commonalities. Let's keep going. We can keep doing this. Okay, let's jump into something different. The Song of Solomon. This is not a monomyth. It's not a calling and a return to the call. This is a religious genre, but it's a different style of religious genre. This is an internal dialogue. The conversation that's happening back and forth between the male and the female here is the conscious and the subconscious self, if one knows that. However, it's really rich, it's really deep, and it reads more like This is the Danielle Steele novel part of the Bible. When you want a marriage, when Jesus is talking about a marriage in the bride chamber, this is what you're looking for right here. Here's your marriage. Okay, Songs 2, Solomon's is said 7 times in here. If I start reading this, what you see right off the bat is you see things like kiss, kisses, mouth, love, wine, ointment, pour forth, virgin. Let's see, chambers, love more than wine, upright love thee. Okay, so I'm going to take some repeats here. I want to see what kiss is. We have 3 times there. How about wine? 6 times, and none of them are swine. Always make sure, sometimes you have to put a space in front of some of these humps. Yeah, it's 6, we're good. Okay, ointment. 3 times. Ointment's going to be healing. Virgin. 2. Well, that's good. Virgin means the inner self that has not been corrupted by life judgments. Therefore do the virgins love you. It's in verse 3. Draw me, we will run after you. The king hath brought me into his chambers. This is the reconnecting with the higher self. We will be glad and rejoice in you, and will remember your love more than wine. The upright love. 67. Some of those are beloved. That's a good number, though. Beloved is 34. I see a well-beloved in there, too. Which would be 33. That'd be fine. 33 or 34 would be good numbers. And that then would make love 33 times, which is exactly good. Yeah. You see, no matter who the author is, that they've got something going on in the background that they know about. They're not telling us, are they? Chambers. It's just a 2. Vineyard. Oops. Vineyard 7 times. Vineyard's what you want to keep. You've not kept your own vineyard. The keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept. I have not maintained my own life experiences. Yeah. And remember the Noah story after the flood. What happens is he creates a new vineyard and drinks wine from it. He's creating a new life experience. And then I'm enjoying this. Yeah, I got that resolved. Well, why didn't I do that before? My gosh, I feel high. It's Camp Higher. The plants are an orchard of camphor. Is that camphor? With spikenard, saffron. Okay, yeah, I think that might be it. Okay, how about tree? 8. That doesn't sound good. Oh, street is one of them. 7. There we go. All right. Sick. 2 times. Stay me with flagons, comfort me with apples, for I am sick of love. The left hand is under my head. Left, that's weird. 3 times. It's healing. Oh, no, there's a cleft in there. 2. Awake. 5 times. Awaken. We want to awaken, don't we? Okay. This time I've jumped over to 1 Samuel, and let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of things here. I want to show you something that is another common thing that you'll run into, and it's a part of the numbering system. But let's take a look at the numbers first. If I go to look for 3, it says 27 times. If I go through here, what I'm going to see is that 3 score is said 1 time. 3 score means what? 60. 60 appears nowhere else, so I don't know why it would need to be 60. However, if during interpretation somebody changes that 60 to 3 score, somehow that is in there, it makes 3 a good number. A 2 and a 7 is good. 27 is good. What about 7 itself? 7 times. 10 I'll skip probably because it does all the often and tense and other things. Smitten. Yeah, let me just... 20. 30. 4 times. 40. 2 times. 50. Just 1 time. Here's what I want to show you. Take a look at right in the beginning. There's a certain man whose name is Elkanah, and he has 2 wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Elkanah, Hannah, and Peninnah. This is us. The conscious is Elkanah. Hannah and Peninnah are 2 individual divisions that we can make. How's the story going to go? This is setting it up. If we come over here to look for Elkanah, is that correct? Yes, it is. Elkanah's name is said 8 times. What does that tell us? Elkanah's not going to be the good guy, the good iteration of us, probably an early iteration of us. Who are his wives? One is Hannah. Her name is repeated 13 times. That's derogatory. The other was Peninnah. Peninnah's name is repeated exactly 3 times. What does that tell you? Who's going to be the good one? Who's going to be the bad one? Or who's going to go, become beneficial? Who's derogatory? What I want to do is go back to Genesis real quick, because there's a point in here. It's where you just have to read and understand that there's something going on that sounds different. And Lamech took unto himself 2 wives. One was Adah, and the other was Zillah. So what happens if we look at these names? Lamech is said 10 times. We know Lamech is, in this case, going to be a good element. How about Adah? 8 times. What do you know? And what about Zillah? 3. All right. You can't see those patterns by just really reading the Bible. You have to do what I'm doing here. I could keep doing that all through the New and the Old Testament. It just doesn't matter. There is something in the background here that is so stark that we don't see. We're not privy to it. We're not smart enough for something, I don't know. You can tell somebody knows what's going on, and this goes back. But let's take a look at these numbers right here for a second. I'm going to pull up the Enuma Elish, and let's just do a little bit of searching. This is Babylonian material that predates Genesis. All right, I've got the Babylonian creation myth up here, the Timothy J. Stephanie translation. And let's just go ahead and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to grab some random words that I'm already aware of. We already saw in the video where Marduk? 41 times, exact same amount as Noah. Okay. Who are the first beings? Lamu and Lahamu. Lamu, L-A-H. M-U. Oops. 11 times. Okay, well, that's just, it sounds like it could be one of our numbers, doesn't it? That's just the first one, so let's not put much to it. Let's keep looking ahead. Lahamu. That one is 7. What is significant about that is Lamu and Lahamu represent the Adam and Eve portion in this right here. Day 7, Lahamu 7. Yeah, it's not identical, but there's definitely some solid borrowing going on. Down here we've got Anshar caused his son Anu to be just like him, and from Anu came Nudimmud. I'm going to say this is a division right here, a Cain and Abel type division, Anu and Nudimmud. Anu, this is difficult because there is Anu power. Anu power is repeated 5 times. So there's various Anu things that are in there. But from Anu came Nudimmud. Nudimmud is N-U-D. Nudimmud. Nudimmud, 8. There's the bad element right there, isn't it? Anu's the good, Nudimmud's the bad. There's the division happening. The numbering pattern is in place. What happens when things go bad and the destruction begins is that there's this force called into being called Lady Huber. Lady Huber would represent in this kind of like, not necessarily the serpent. That would be temptation. Lady Huber represents the anger and the violence that strikes out when we freak out, when we act out, or when we have conflict in our mind. In fact, going back over this is the part of the template, Lady Huber. There, if you were to read it, you would see Lady Huber calls all these things, and then they come and do all this stuff, and then it repeats. Lady Huber comes and does all these things, and it's like a direct repeat. What that is the early version of cyclical pain. Yeah, all of that stuff when we're not feeling okay. Lady Huber is the force. Eight times. Devil. 8 times. Power. Boy, I don't know, because there's various kinds of power, and there's overpowered. Yeah, that one probably needs more analysis. Let's not. I don't want to go through that in the video. Let's just find another word that's easier to that doesn't require so much looking at right quick. Looking at so much. Deadly is said 5 times, which is an interesting thing, isn't it? Voice. 25. Sleep. 7. Without going on, it should become evident right off the bat that it's like, oh, that's a numbering system that's in the background in both Babylonian and Genesis works, Jewish works. And it's in Christian works, yeah. You see that? When I look at that, the best I can speculate when I think it through is that in the background, somebody knows a pathway out there. They know this template. They're maintaining the teachings on the template at any point in time. There's something bigger than the religions. That it originated definitely before Genesis. In Genesis, we see 3 locations where the Adam lineage is, where the Shem lineage is, and where the Sodom righteous, would you destroy it for this many, that many? That's where the 50s show up, 50, 50, 50, 50. Okay, all those numbers keep coming up from that same pool. So they're being collected in Genesis, which is this, I don't know, it's like a number generator up there. And then those continue to pattern throughout the material. But in Genesis, they're showing where they're structured, but then if you look, you see that structure was already in place before Genesis. So there's probably something upstream that are analog farms in Babylonian, Sumerian material that I'm not aware of, and I don't have time to research it, but it would be fragmentary. The Genesis stuff is probably complete. It was probably all preserved. The really old stuff on clay tablets, some of that stuff was fragmentary. So there could be, you have to put there's a margin of error that's going to come into play depending on the nature of the damage. The 7 tablets of creation, the Enuma Elish, were in fairly good shape. There was some damage to them near the end. But then there's other sources of things that can be cross-referenced over to it to help build it and kind of shore it up. It still isn't complete, but there are things about it that you look at it and go, there's enough there to look at it and go, even given the amount of potential error, you can look at what I did right there, listen to what the analogous term means, see where it fits on the numbering pattern and go, yeah, you can see that. You can see that. So that was going on before Genesis, and that Genesis, what's happening is that religions build off of each other. That they don't keep working. Jews are not going to follow the Enuma Elish. They're not going to build Babylon. They've got to do something different. The Christians are done looking for Canaan. Hey, where's the Savior? Yep. But then then the Romans hack that up and turn it into a just worship, and you got it. So this stuff is getting lost. You can see at that time there's a lot of stories written. It was very prolific at that time. There's a lot of Gnostic material that was written that's all in the same pattern, but it wasn't carried in the same kind of religious shell that was released to the public. That stuff was put, you can see that. And you can see why. The general public is not meant to have access to this. You're meant to just believe what your religion tells you. And it's a very comfortable thing to do. Many people defend it staunchly as a, what is it? It's a life and death. It's not a joke. I know that. I know how people feel about it. I also know that when I was 9 years old, I cut my brother out of the tree after he killed himself because he thought when he died he was going to appear in heaven. And I've been looking for him. This is what I find. It's not the answer I want. But it's what I see. And I think it's important to share it. It's probably supposed to be kept in private, except that now the world is turning into a different place and things are coming apart. And the real reason that that's happening isn't being looked at. We're overfilling our terrarium. But we have a lot of feelings, and we want to stay away from pain, and we want to move towards joy. How does that happen? You cannot joyfully wipe people out, but if you demonize them, you can feel good about it. Then, And when you demonize them, the fear helps do that. And that's happening as an evolutionary process, that it's not being recognized. So, here we are. Anyway, I'm just trying to go through the material at this time because that's what I'm learning. All right, this video was about trying to read that code. I'm going to start working on Genesis and going through chapter by chapter. This is kind of critical because this is what I'm going to get started on. It's hard to describe what I'm doing each time as I go along, but I have to at some point just leave people and go. There's a point where this has to happen in the mind of the person, and I've got it going on in my mind, but I realize I'm learning. I don't know what to do. I'm learning as I go, honestly. And I'm realizing that I need to make some progress with this in a different way. But I accidentally learned that if I took one chapter out of Genesis and isolated it and searched, the number pattern is there at a chapter level that is different than in the entire book. So it's going to require more analysis than what I've done before. What we have to understand is that they had all of these things in their mind at the same time. As I'm describing where the numbers come from, they would be going, yeah, I got that, go. We already know that. We're way behind the ball, honestly. If you think about what they were doing, they had all of this in their head at the same time. Think of the things you are very knowledgeable of. It's all up here. They had all of this up there. We don't. We read it from a book from a distance and do not know the depth of this material. And we don't give it enough time to access it. people aren't going to see this. Why? Because it just takes too much time. And this numbering pattern is simply something that I could show on the computer that would make people go, well, there's something there. I have no doubt people are going to go, what is that? Yeah, it takes a bit of personal work to get there. There's only so much that can be explained before the person has to go, I've got to go figure that out. There's something in here. It's like a language, it's a code, it's a puzzle. And unless I can play it out in my mind, I don't really get it. I don't. I'm just listening to somebody else say something. Not until I play it out in my mind does it really become mine. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, but the Tao that is played out in the mind is the eternal Tao. So right now I'm not even talking, what I'm saying is not the eternal Tao. But I'm not preaching something supernatural. There's something at a level of template in here. And this video really wasn't a focus on that, but really showing not only the numbers, patterns, and the repeats. That's what we're seeing. But now you look and see that words are repeated the same amount of times, and we don't even see those. So those numbers that we see, the 6,000 plus, it's even a bigger number than that. It's held in another layer in how many times nouns or verbs are repeated in that same number sequence. So it's all about numbers. The patterns are there just rolling along. We can see the patterns. If you analyze them, they kind of emerge. It's old code. We have to get into their heads. We have to understand that we would have had it memorized, that we're smart, we're figuring it out, we're going through it daily. We're figuring this stuff out. Today, people worship it or they deny it. They don't understand there's something else in there. All right. When I get into the Genesis series then, which is really Genesis 1, I'm going to go chapter by chapter. 50 chapters, 50 videos. Yeah, but I'm just going to take chapter at a time. One chapter, boom. But this is going to be the precursor to that. So I get into it. I don't have to explain this every time. This is a big process that has to be in place before the rest of it's understood. As I get into the chapters, I'm going to be using this numbering pattern to search, and it's going to help analyze things. So I don't want to explain this every time. You see how big it is and that how prevalent it is. I don't want to just say, here's the numbers, but I want to say, here's the numbers, and let's look all over the place and see what I'm talking about, that they're in use. And that's what we're seeing. So I don't have all the answers. Definitely not. This is a puzzle-solving adventure. All right, I hope the video was fun and interesting, and looking forward to Genesis 1 then. Yeah, this is, I guess, the introduction perhaps. Maybe not the introduction, but the precursor. It's like this is going to help anybody coming along later going, what are you interpreting in these numbers that throughout the chapters? Just come back and watch this. That way each of those videos can stay a lot shorter. Okay. See you in the next video.